Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for being here. Welcome to the Justice and Change for Victims of Nursing Facilities Forum. Just waiting for everybody to get. Okay. So again, welcome. And thank you for being here. We are the Justice and Change for Victims of Nursing Facilities group. I'm Joanna Heiskill, and your host for this forum this evening is Tracy Pompey. Tracy?
Thank you, Joanna. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our forum. Our main goal for this forum is to empower everyone for if you're ever faced with the possibility of having someone in a nursing facility. Each one of our members are going to speak a little bit, just in case you don't know, a little bit of our story. So you'll know how this whole group came about. So to start it off, my dad was David L. Jones and was refused medical care at Glen Burnie Rehab after vomiting stool several times over the course of the evening. That resulted in his death. The events were covered up by a coerced arbitration agreement and false documentation. I was led to this group from Joanna's story on the news and wanted to join in the fight against systemic neglect in these facilities. That's a part of my story. Let me introduce you to Kelly.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending. My name is Kelly Edwards, and I joined this group after seeing Joanna's interview on the news, and I instantly felt a connection. My mother, her name is Gloria Cowan, suffered from neglect for many years in various nursing home facilities. I am very thankful I found this network of support, and everything I do is in my mother's name and for every person who is currently suffering right now. And next up is Karen.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Karen Clark. This group was founded after Joanna's story was aired on the local news. I could relate to Joanna's story, and I felt her pain having to deal with some of the same issues that she faced. My mother, Ellen Clark, was a resident at the Laurels of Bonaire for several years, and she passed away on June 26, 2020 due to neglect. Thanks for joining this evening, everyone. Next up, we have
Hello. Yes, me. Thanks, Karen.
Mm-hmm.
So my mother's name is Merlene Alma Cartwright. That's my mother's name. She was a resident at Bonview Rehabilitation Nursing Facility. The lack of accountability and heartless response to my mother's pleas for help is totally unacceptable. It was the treatment at this facility that hastened my mother's passing on August 22nd of 2019.
Thank you, ladies, for your stories. At this time, I would like to introduce our speaker for the evening. Our speaker for the evening is Lauren Ellerman, is an attorney at Frith and Ellerman Law Firm, and she is the co-author of A Consumer's Guide to Long-Term Care Choices in Virginia. Mrs. Ellerman, you have our attention.
Tracy, thank you so much. And I can't tell you how impressed I am already with this group, with your organization, and with your call for advocacy. So I am a nursing home abuse and neglect attorney, which means I sue nursing homes across Virginia when people suffer permanent or life-ending injuries. But sadly, most of what I do is explain to families why the law won't help them. Because the law is great I hate to use this analogy because it's a little overplayed, but if you're a hammer, you know, a nail is exactly what you're looking for. The law does not in any way adequately offer any options for families whose loved ones are in nursing homes. So I am here to tell you that what I do all day long is inadequate. I cannot help families most of the time. In fact, 90% of the calls I get, I have to turn down because it does not meet what we would call the small sliver of a medical malpractice lawsuit. And I'll talk a little bit about why that is, but what I've learned over the years is that lawsuits don't really change anything anyway. Now, that's a horrible admission for a lawyer to admit. But just as I've learned the justice system isn't just, I have learned that one lawsuit will not change an industry. 20 lawsuits will not change an industry. 100 lawsuits will not change an industry. It takes advocates who speak up and use their collective voice to change an industry. Now, let me start by saying the following. For those of you who are on this call, means you have had to make the hard decision to put a loved one in some kind of long-term care. How many of you wished that that was not your only choice, right? Nobody wants to do that. I remember years ago asking a financial advisor, I said, I don't ever want to go to a nursing home. So how much money do I have to have in order for my family to care for me at home? And he said, in today's dollars, you need $1.4 million to pay for in-home care should you have a chronic disease, right? $25 an hour times 24 hours a day times 7 days a week times 52. I mean, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. So most families end up with a nursing home, not because they wanted to, but because a chronic injury or a chronic health condition has led to the requirement of 24 hours a day care. Now, I'm going to ask you this. On average, in a Virginia nursing home, how much hands-on care do you think each patient receives out of 24 hours a day? How much hands-on care do you think? It's 1 hour, 10 hours, 12 hours, 20 hours?
I'd say an hour.
It's usually an hour and 20 minutes a day. So we as consumers are told you go to a nursing home because it's 24-hour day care. And we as working women cannot provide 24-hour day care to our loved one. So we let the nursing home do that for us. That's what they advertise. That's what's in the shiny brochures and the lovely website with the pretty pansies and all of that. And it's on average in Virginia, they get less than an hour and a half a day of actual hands-on care. Okay, so how does that happen? How does the system allow that to happen? All right, well, I'm going to talk about who governs a nursing home, what rules govern a nursing home, so that you can help members of your community, friends, families, etc., avoid what you have suffered, okay? And I will say this, there are two levels of laws that govern a nursing home. There's the federal law, which the Centers for Medicare Services promulgates. It's in the federal code. And if the facility takes Medicare dollars, they have to abide by the federal code. And then there's state law. And the state law over Virginia's nursing homes is found in the Virginia Administrative Code, and it is the most useless, wishy-washy, unhelpful section of the code you can find. It basically doesn't say anything, including staffing requirements. It would be perfectly legal for a nursing home to have 140 residents and one RN in the building. One RN in the building. It's perfectly legal in Virginia for 140 residents to have one CNA. Now this is interesting. You cannot have 140 inmates in a jail with only one guard, right? Because that would put the guard at risk. So in a state-run prison or a jail, there are actually staffing ratios of how many guards you need to protect the imprisoned. Same with daycares. You couldn't have 145-year-olds and one caregiver, right? Who would send their kid to that daycare? No one would by choice. So almost every industry in Virginia where you have a ratio between caregiver and care recipient, there is a required staffing level. Virginia has no staffing level when it comes to long-term care, to nursing homes. And there's one reason for that. Dollars, 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 dollars. If you are a for-profit nursing home, the way you make money is by understaffing, okay? The way you make money is by not hiring more staff. Now, I'm gonna give you the following. If you have a pen, this is the most important website you'll write down today. Okay, and it's a Medicare.gov. Well, why do you need to write that down, right? It's pretty easy. But Medicare.gov, if you wanted to search the nursing homes in your area, you can do it by zip code, you can type in Chesterfield, you could type in Richmond, you could type in Roanoke, and it would come up with all of the nursing homes. Now, you see the 5-star rating system, ignore that completely, ignore it. About 5 years ago, it was useful, but all of these for-profit systems have figured out how to game it. So they're no longer adequate reflections of the care you receive in the nursing home. The most important metrics you want to see on Medicare.gov when comparing a nursing home to a nursing home, is it a for-profit nursing home or nonprofit? So that's metric number 1, nonprofit versus for-profit. The second most important metric is daily staffing. And that's why I asked you in the beginning, how many hours of care do you think are being provided a day? That number is public. It is not private. You can go on Medicare.gov and you can compare the facilities that David and Gloria and Ellen and Merlene lived in to see who has the highest staffing levels a day, right? That is the most important metric that you want to research in choosing a nursing home, is the one-on-one staffing level provided to each patient per patient day. All right. And it will even show you the state average and whether this facility is below average or above average. Now, here's the interesting statistic. When you see, for example, facility A provides an hour and 20 minutes of care a day, it's not really an hour of 20 minutes of care a day, because the administrator's time, if they are RNs or LPNs, are calculated into that. And there are people in the nursing home who never saw your loved ones, who never laid eyes on them, who were in dark closets in the corners, typing things into computers that were being sent to Washington for Medicare reimbursement only. MDS coordinators are what they're called. They never lay eyes on your patient. They're not providing any actual acute care. And unfortunately, their time is considered hands-on care. So 120 is a roundup. It's usually less than that. But the reason the nursing home the industry gets away with this is because Congress loves when you make a buck, right? So for-profit facilities are the problem. In the 15 years that I've been doing nursing home abuse and neglect, I've sued one facility that claims to be a nonprofit, one. And that was a facility that was a for-profit facility and decided they wanted to advertise that they were a nonprofit facility. So they had just switched their corporate designation, but they were still operating like a for-profit facility. Now, I'm going to give you an example of how nursing homes make money. So for those loved ones you've had in there, probably most of you, the first 100 days Medicare paid, right? And the nursing home will tell Medicare how sick your loved one is, because the sicker they are, the more the nursing home can charge, okay? And the more they can charge, the more they get money back. So for the first 100 days, if you were to look at what's called the MDS report, it's called the multiple data set, which is part of the patient health record that you never get to see. Unfortunately, they don't offer it to you. But everyone is really, 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 really sick so that Medicare pays more money, but they're not going to die in 6 months because Medicare won't let you rehab if you have a chronic condition that you're going to die in 6 months. So everybody's really, really, really sick, but they're going to be okay for at least a year. That's what this paperwork looks like, right? That's why they put stroke victims in PT. People who can't lift a fork are all of a sudden getting physical therapy services. Then what happens on day 101? Everyone is either miraculously healed, right? And they're kicked out of the nursing home because Medicare won't pay anymore, or they're now Medicaid and they no longer require physical therapy, occupational therapy, or speech therapy because Medicaid, which is aid when you can't pay privately, won't pay for those things, okay? So that's where the racket starts, is the payment process. So Medicare will pay for speech therapy, occupational therapy, all of that good stuff. Medicaid will not. So everyone miraculously either gets better or goes home on day 99 through 101. That's what happens. And if they stay in the facility, they all of a sudden lose all those services that they needed on Monday. As Tuesday, they don't need them anymore. It all has to do with reimbursement. So Medicaid pays around $4,000 a month for a nursing home patient. Medicare will pay up to $7,000 to $8,000 a month for a nursing home patient, right? So Medicare is looked at like the little golden tickets, which is why every facility advertises rehab, 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 because that's where the money is to be made in the first 100 days. If they keep your loved one and they get half the reimbursement, they're getting much, much less than half the care. Very rarely is the neglect in the first 100 days. Typically, it's once you've been moved from what we call the skilled care unit to the long-term care unit. So you're no longer in our money-making section. Medicare's no longer paying for you. We no longer have therapists looking at you all day long, and our best of the best is no longer. You're now in the JV section of the nursing home where the dollars are less, so the care is less, right? And this is a hard concept because, you know, I was raised, hate to talk politics, but I was raised by capitalists. We like the opportunity to make a dollar, right? That's America. But the fundamental question is, should we be making profits off of the care of the elderly? And in the United States, the answer is yes. And there is big money to be made in the care of the elderly. So when people call me and they say, well, Lauren, what is to be done? Fundamentally, the biggest change that needs to happen in the United States is to no longer allow for-profit senior care. That would change the system immeasurably. And here's what happens in a for-profit facility. Okay, so let's say you have, and I went to law school because math is not my thing, so we're going to use really easy numbers here. So let's say you have 100 beds, and let's say 50 of those are Medicare beds, and 50 are Medicaid beds. And so I just said that you could make $8,000 a month off your Medicare patients, and let's say $4,000 a month on your Medicare patients. So you're bringing in, that's good money right there, guys. That's about $600,000 a month on 100 residents, right? The average cost of food per patient per day in a nursing home is less than $5. So if the facility's bringing in $600,000 a month, it's not on the food. You and I both know it's not on the decor. They're using 20-year-old beds. They stink. They smell bad. And we know that money is not going to CNAs because CNAs typically make minimum wage, and they're not getting paid benefits, and they're not offered full-time wages. So what happens is that facility has to pay rent every month. Well, probably it's double the rent of every other business in that community, right? So the rent might be 10 grand and you might be in Gretna, Virginia with a population of 10,000 people where the most rent for any commercial space is, you know, $200 a square foot. But that rent money goes to the home company, that home office in Richmond or Roanoke, who makes great money on rent. Then if you're looking at the profit and loss statement of the nursing home, you see that they're paying $20,000 a month or $100,000 a month on home office management fees, right? So then that money gets swept away to the home office. Big money is leaving. Then this is an actual case. I was looking at the profit and loss statement because I can get it from a FOIA request because it's all public information because it's our tax dollars going to this, ladies. It's Medicare and Medicaid money. So we can get that as citizens. You can send a Freedom of Information Act request to get the finances of any nursing home. You don't even have to have a loved one there. You can just, I mean, any journalist could do this. But years ago, I had a case against a suit about a facility in Southside, Virginia, and I noticed that the director of laundry services was making $40,000 a year. Well, so I imagined somebody who was doing the laundry. And I thought, well, gosh, that's hard work. I think $40,000 is good salary for that work. So I asked in all my depositions, who's the director of laundry services? It's the owner's brother. Oh, does he come to the facility every day and do the laundry? We've never seen him. Oh, so who does the laundry? Oh, well, the housekeeping staff does the laundry. So they had invented a position called Director of Laundry Services and siphoned off $40,000 to the owner's brother, right? Well, I found out the Director of Dietary Services was the same thing. So you look at the nursing home profit and loss statement, and the home office is making hundreds of thousands, rent is hundreds of thousands, these consultants are hundreds of thousands. One large Virginia nursing home chain spends $2 million a year on their airplane. Okay. And this is what happens in for-profit facilities. So then if you're the administrator of the facility and you're looking at your profit and loss and you see, well, gosh, I only have $10,000 a month to hire CNAs because I've had to pay rent, I've had to pay for the airplane, I've had to pay the managerial fees to the home office. I can't hire any more staff. And by law, I don't have to. So that's how all of this horrible stuff happens to your loved ones, because you have one or two undervalued CNAs who make $7.25 an hour. Ladies, how many of you would bag groceries for $7.25 an hour before you were assigned 30 people to take care of? I would. I have one child. If someone said to me, I either was responsible for 38-year-olds or I could go bag groceries, I would bag groceries for the sole purpose of I know there's no way I could competently care for 38-year-olds. So how is one human being expected to competently care for 30 patients who are so sick they need to be in a nursing home? It's impossible, which is how the system is set up to fail, right? That is why cover-ups happen. That's why fraud happens. That's why these nurses are stealing pain pills, because if this was your life every day, you wouldn't be able to cope either. So as long as for-profit systems are allowed without any kind of staffing requirement, the system will not change. No lawsuit will change it. No thousands of lawsuits will change it. And here's another reason. How many of you have the distinct pleasure of paying for car insurance every month or every year, right? We all do, because we drive cars. Well, let's say Joanna was pulling out of the Kroger. I accidentally hit Joanna, right? And Joanna says, sorry, I got to make an insurance claim. I notify my State Farm agent. My State Farm policy pays Joanna, okay? It doesn't come out of my pocket. It comes out of my State Farm insurance. That's why I have insurance. The same happens with nursing homes, which is why lawsuits don't affect them, because the payment of a lawsuit comes out of their insurance policy, not their pockets, okay? So it doesn't affect their bottom line at all. And as Tracy mentioned, there's arbitration agreements in 100% of their contracts, which means even if you do have a valid claim against them, it's confidential because you're stuck in arbitration. Arbitration is awful, and it's confidential. So the fact that this facility has been sued 10 times in arbitration isn't public record, it's private record, and no one knows about it. And that's why years ago, my law partner and I, we were fielding these calls every single day from families just like you. And they were families of, you know, I work full time, so I couldn't take care of my mom, and she fell and she broke her hip. And the social worker at the hospital said, these are the best nursing homes. This is where you should look. Right now, that's a lie. The social worker at the hospital is receiving a fax every morning from these death trap facilities saying, we have 10 bed opens. We have 5 bed openings. We have 20 bed openings. The for-profit facilities market to the social workers at the hospital and make their job easier by sending them a daily fax of how many beds they have, so that the social worker doesn't have to give you the list of the 20 facilities in town. The social worker says to you, these 3 facilities have beds. They don't even have to call. So that's how you get sent to these for-profit facilities, because they're marketing the hospital social workers. So then you end up going to the one that's nearest your home, because as working mothers, we're thinking, how do I squeeze that into my day, right? Mm-hmm. How do I squeeze into caring for my mom? Okay, well, I'm going to pick the one that's on my way home from work or on my way to church, or at least in some general part of the neighborhood, I go more than once a month. So I pick it based on location. And 90% of the time, these nursing homes are picked. You've never gotten a tour. You've never seen the facility, and what you're told is your loved one just needs rehab. They're only going to be there for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days or 100 days for Medicare. And then what I told you a few minutes ago, what happens is around day 99, they say, oh, your loved one's not going to get better, so we need to apply for Medicaid, and they're going to move from our skilled care into our long-term care. And that's where you get the really bad care, because now they're being charged half the price, so you get even less services. So the real answer is, how do we change the system? We elect people who care enough to put people over profits. Now, which people? It's not the people in Richmond. So your member of the General Assembly, my member of the General Assembly, my member of the State Senate, this has nothing to do with them. This is a federal issue, okay? So the people you send to Washington are the ones who do this. So our senators are Warner and Kane. Now, about a year ago, there was a bill put up in, maybe 2 years ago now, I've aged so much since this bill was put up, by my member of Congress named Bob Goodlatte, who's trying to make the hospitals and the nursing homes happy. So he was going to outlaw medical malpractice suits everywhere in the United States forever, because poor doctors, they don't make enough, right? That was his basic premise. So when we got in front of Senator Kane to talk about how bad this was, he said, let me tell you what. He said, if Congress was ever smart enough to attach this to universal health care, meaning if there was a bill that was a Medicare for all type bill, and the flip side was that you trial lawyers would never get to sue a doctor or a nursing home again, he said, I'd vote for it, because it is more important for people to have access to care than it is to hold people accountable for bad care. Wow. So it's possible in my lifetime that if we ever got to see a Medicare for all or health insurance for all, that we will not be able to hold facilities accountable in a lawsuit. Now, I have personal reasons that I don't think that's the right way to do it, but that is possible. But we'd have to have the gutsiest congressmen and senators in the world to stand up to for-profit healthcare lobbies and say, we don't think that you should be able to pay shareholders on the backs of 85-year-olds who can't talk because they have dementia. That requires a level of guts that elected officials do not have. So unfortunately, my bad news message is the system will not change until that happens. So the best thing you can do as an advocate is help friends and family find a few of the better facilities and get their loved ones out of there as fast as they can. And that's really hard stuff. Now, a couple bits of good news. We're not alone in fighting this fight. There are literally millions of people across America who have dealt with this. And what COVID did was open the window and show us all that the system was broken. We knew that. I mean, my friends would forward me news articles and I'd be like, yeah, I've known this for 15 years. The system is broken. And when you make $7.25 an hour and you have to work at 3 nursing homes, guess what? You're going to spread COVID to all 3 nursing homes, right? I mean, you're going to do that. Mm-hmm. So, and no, you don't have time to wash your hands and put a mask on when you're walking in the room because you're taking care of 30 patients. And all of their call bells are ringing and all of them need to be changed and all of them need to be dressed. And then you're supposed to chart how much they ate for dinner. No, you're going to lie about that because you don't know how much they ate for dinner because you're taking care of 30 people. And by the way, you've never been on this hall before. You don't even know their names. So when you have to chart how much they're going to eat, you're going to write 100%, even on the ones that don't eat. Right? I have seen so much fraudulent charting because it's primarily women are overworked and underpaid. I've seen amputees whose charts say they have strong foot pulses, right? They don't have feet. I've seen people who are dead who are receiving their pain medication. I see this stuff all the time, not because the people who go into that line of work are bad, not because they intend to hurt people. It happens because the system is broken. And so long as we put profits over people and we allow for-profit nursing homes coupled with no staffing requirements, this will continue every single day, okay? So here's some good things. Just this week, and you hate to talk politics, but it's all politics, ladies. Unfortunately, when you are dealing with systemic brokenness in the healthcare field, it is politics. But Joe Biden just this week announced that part of his new infrastructure plan is direct money for home health care so that families don't have to go in nursing homes. That's huge. It's like billions of dollars that he's trying to put aside to keep people in their homes. Okay, that number one. We started off by admitting a person in a nursing home only gets an hour and a half care a day. What if we could keep our loved ones in their homes? We could provide that hour and a half care a day, and a home health care worker could come provide those extra 10 hours a day. Well, that'd be 10 more hours than they're getting in a nursing home. Now, wouldn't that be amazing, right? That's the way the system has to go. Who's going to pay for that? Well, we're already paying for it, right? We're paying for the facilities to have a $2 million plane because it's Medicare and Medicaid dollars that are paying for that. So, you know, when people say, oh, that's going to be expensive and we're going to have tax increase, fine. If people live longer, if they're staying in their homes, if they have a quality of life, fine. Jack up the Medicare prices. We will pay that tax gladly because it will be every single one of us on this call someday. Because again, when I asked years ago, how much is it going to cost for me to get in-home care? $1.4 million, right? So the bad news is what I do for a living, I don't help families. I help them be heard. That's it, right? I help them be heard. But I don't change the system in suing nursing homes one at a time. I sue the same chain that's based in Roanoke 20 times a year, 10 times a year, 5 times a year. They don't change because it's very profitable not to change, right? If you have a really bad employee that makes you money, are you going to get rid of that employee? Probably not. And this system makes the for-profit facilities money. So those are some of the big, unfortunate, bad news. Now, if you do have a loved one in a facility, how do you make, if you can, and it's hard, but how do you make the facility do the right thing, right? Well, the first thing you do, if your loved one is in the facility, you have a legal right to request the policies and procedures of the facility. Virginia law says that. So if your mom's in a nursing home or your dad's, and tell your friends this because nobody knows this, you can go in and you can say, I'd like to see the policies and procedures. Well, wow, you wouldn't believe what's in those policies and procedures, including that everyone's skin is checked every 48 hours. Well, if you knew that the policy of this facility required a head-to-toe skin check, when you come see Nurse Joyce, you can say to Nurse Joyce, hey, how are Dad's heels? I know that he needs to be checked every 48 hours. Have you checked his heels yet? Nope, let's go in the room and do it right now, right? If you know your father's been assessed as a fall risk and the policies and procedures say he needs to be wearing a green bracelet because we put green bracelets on fall risks, then you can say to Nurse Joyce, hey, I noticed Dad didn't have the green bracelet on that says he's a fall risk. If your loved one's been assessed as a choking risk and you read the policies and procedures and the policies and procedures say he can't be alone for eating, he needs to be supervised for his entire meal, then you know to say, hey, I noticed Dad wasn't supervised for that meal. So the policies and procedures are the roadmap to the care your loved one should get. And when you check your loved one into the facility, they don't offer them to you. They don't say, oh, by the way, here's our rule book, hold us accountable. No, they don't want to because they know they can't meet those expectations. But first and foremost, you hold them accountable by getting a copy of the rule book, and that's called policies and procedures, okay? Number 2, you write everything down. Everything. I tell people all the time, your loved one goes into a nursing home, your first stop is at CVS for, you know, those old school little notebooks that we used to have, these, but, you know, with the binders on the side. And you write everything down like it's a darn journal. Called Dad at 4:15 p.m. It rang 19 times, right? No one picked up phone. Asked to speak to my father. No one was in the room. This is again pre-COVID when you're allowed to visit your loved ones. My cousin Jerry went to see Dad. Dad had food on his shirt. You make sure that the facility sees what you see. And if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. I've had a million cases, almost every single case where the loved one said, I filed my complaint with Nurse Joyce. Okay, did you do that in writing? No. And then I deposed Nurse Joyce. And I say, Nurse Joyce, did the Brown family ever have a complaint? Nope, never had a complaint. Meanwhile, the Brown family tells me every time they were in the facility, they were complaining. But if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. So you keep a note and logs, and then you get Nurse Joyce's email address, because trust me, the director of nursing and the unit coordinators all have email addresses. And you paper the hell, excuse my language, it's Easter, Jesus forgive me. You paper the hell out of that. Your complaints are in emails, right? And yes, you are the squeaky wheel, but you do it with kindness, right? When you treat the staff with respect and you recognize that they have an impossible task, the CNAs have an impossible task in every facility in Virginia. Every time I take a deposition, I say to every single nurse, have you ever been bored at work? Have you ever been overstaffed? Has there ever been too many nurses on your hall that you didn't have work to do? And without fail, they laugh out loud. Without fail. Because the exact opposite is the case. I mean, I've had women say, I can't pee during my 12-hour shift because I don't have time to go to the bathroom. So that is the reality. When I sue a nursing home, I'm not suing the nurse who was asked to cover up. I'm not suing the nurse who unfortunately used the wrong equipment and dropped my patient, or, you know, decided that she couldn't ask for another nurse to come help her use the Hoyer lift, even though it requires 2 people, because she was at least trying to get this person in bed when no one else was there to help. So this is my Maggie, by the way. Maggie, you say hi to all these nice ladies.
Hi, Maggie.
But I don't sue the nurses. I don't blame them. They're in an impossible situation. I go after the corporate structure, and I want to find out what the turnover is. I had a case not too long ago where I found out that in a 2-week period, 22 nurses quit a facility. 22 nurses quit.
Wow.
So when I was deposing the director of nursing, I said, how on earth did you fill 22 jobs in 14 days? She said, well, I hired a staffing company, and they literally brought women in from Georgia, put them in the motel next to the nursing home, and they started providing care to our patients. I said, great. So then I started deposing those nurses, and I said, tell me about your training at this facility. Did they give you copies of the policies and procedures? No. Did you have an orientation? No. Were you able to sit with the patient charts a few hours before you provided care in order to acquaint yourself with the patient needs? No. So they're setting these people up for failure. But again, that's profitable, so it will continue. So the unfortunate thing I have to say is lawsuits don't help. News stories like Joanna's do help. Because, I mean, let me ask you guys, how many of you have ever written a Google review of a restaurant, right?
Mm-hmm.
I own a restaurant. I got a bad one this morning, right? Someone didn't like their oysters last night, so I got a 2-star review. That kind of stuff moves the needle a little bit, but also every nursing home I've ever deposed, the nursing staff is told to go on and write 5-star reviews for the facility. And I see it on Facebook every day. It's like cut and paste, like, oh, this is a wonderful place and blah, 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 blah. And I look at her profile, I'm like, you work there. What are you doing reviewing it? That's not a neutral review. So you can be honest on online reviews. But again, most families don't have time to choose because they're handed a list from the social worker at the hospital and they're told, your mom's going home at noon today and you have 3 minutes to pick which facility. So, okay. So, you know, news stories help because all it does is raise the collective awareness that these places are not providing the care that their brochures say they are. Lawsuits don't really help. Truthfully, a federal advocacy, a lobbying effort, which I hope and pray I see in my lifetime, but it's really going to have to change. The politics of America are really going to have to change. Now, I practice in Western Virginia. I'm in a rural area. Most of my clients are conservative. Most of my clients, I would guess, have voted for Republicans. And when I give them this speech about why their loved one doesn't have a case, or, you know, why a lawsuit won't move the needle, and they say to me, well, what can I do? I say, stop voting for Republicans. They get offended. And I say, but I'm sorry, but that's the truth, because they're going to put corporations above people. And this is the one industry where profits, I'm fine if you make money off of a cheeseburger. You should be allowed to make a profit, off of Kroger groceries. But maybe we shouldn't allow profits over the care of 90-year-old folks with chronic illness. Maybe we should just say that's not okay.
Mhm.
And until we do that, I fear that the system will not change. And by the way, when we do that, my practice will be shut down. I will have no calls, which will be great. Because again, I don't sue the nonprofit ones, because the nonprofit ones, when they have that $600,000 a month, they don't just send it to the corporate headquarters for the airplane. They hire more nurses. Or they give the nurse that's been there 10 years a raise so that she stays, because she's good and she loves her job and she would like to stay and take care of the people who have become her family, but now she can afford to do that. Or they pay benefits. There's something for you. So that's really, unfortunately, the reality of this system, is that it's totally broken and there's nothing I can do to fix it. But you guys, I was so impressed with you and your Facebook page and your group. You guys are doing it. You need to, and unfortunately, this is a club no one wants to be in, guys. No one wants to join your club. They're only joining your club after the bad thing has happened. So somehow you need to reach out to the people before the bad thing has happened, right? Because you don't want this to be like, Mothers Demand Action, where it's women who have lost their children to gun violence. That you don't want to be in this club. But the advocacy on the federal level is the only thing that will change this. The only thing. Now I'm gonna stop yapping, and I would like to answer any questions people would have.
Okay. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we are going to open the floor up for questions. But please take note, Mrs. Ellerman cannot give legal advice on any specific case. She can, however, inform what Virginia law states as it relates to your question. Do we have any questions from our members before I read the submitted ones?
I know Easter's supposed to be the good news day, and here I've just dumped tons of bad news on everyone. This was not a he is risen message. This was he's back in the tomb and we're all very sad. And I'm sorry for that. I should have said this on Friday instead.
Extremely informative though.
Exactly. We did, I will say, oh, go ahead, Joanna.
Oh, no, I was just going to remind everybody that if you do have a question, to please don't forget to unmute your mic.
Just wait.
I just hope a lot of people aren't asking questions behind the mic.
Yes, Miss Nancy, are you waving? Oh, no, you're Marina. Yes.
Yes. I have a question. Could you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can hear you perfectly.
Okay. When a family takes their relative to be admitted to a nursing home, is there something called a family conference before or shortly after the admission, or before the admission?
Are you referring to what I've always called the care plan conference? They say it's a care plan conference.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that term.
So I'm going to answer your question a little bit wider, if that's okay, Marina. If you check a loved one into a nursing home and you are their legal power of attorney, and you have to have the paperwork that says that, you need to tell the nursing home that you're the one that makes the medical decisions, and then they indicate that you are the responsible party. Now, responsible party is a legal term used in the nursing home industry. You can be a loved one who checked your loved one in, but if you're not power of attorney, you may not be the responsible party. You want to make sure you're the responsible party. Forgive me, story, and then I'll get back to your question. I once had a man who was so demented, he walked out of the facility, eloped every day, and he spent 72 hours in the neighboring woods. And when I asked why he wasn't wearing a wander guard, the facility said, well, he didn't want to. And I said, why did you ask a man with dementia what he wanted? And they said, well, he was his own responsible party, which meant when his 3 adult children checked him into the nursing home, They didn't make it clear to the nursing home, or the nursing home didn't write it down, that they were the decision makers. They said the patient was the sole reason he was there is because he couldn't be a decision maker. And we all knew that, right? So the responsible party is allowed to make decisions based under the law. Sometimes it's a power of attorney. Sometimes it's somebody who's just very involved. Typically, they do not invite the whole family to any conference. Typically, they invite one, the responsible party. And that is the only thing they're obligated to do. Now, you, Marina, if you have loved ones and it's a group decision, you then invite those other individuals to the table. And you say, for this care plan conference, I would like my brothers and my sisters or my husband or whoever else to attend that meeting, and they must honor that request. Now, before COVID, I heard this from every darn nursing home. Care plan meetings are only held in person. So if you're working and you get an invitation on a Monday to a Tuesday at 10 a.m. care plan meeting, are you able to take the day off of work to attend a meeting that you didn't have on your schedule? Of course not. But thankfully, COVID has changed that one thing. Now those care plan conferences are held via Zoom or phone. And so you demand it be rescheduled until you can attend. You do not have to agree to them having it without you. You demand to be part of that care plan meeting. And that's where your notes are gold. Because you say, okay, well, what have you care planned for my dad? Is he a fall risk? Is he a pressure ulcer risk? Is he a swallowing risk? What are you doing about those things? These are the things I'm noticing. And that's when that conversation has, but rarely does it involve the whole family, unless whoever the responsible party is brings in the other members of the family. Marina, have I answered that at all?
Yes, in a sense. Another question. When the patient is admitted, does the institution have a handbook that they give to the significant other for them to know more about the institution, whether there are do's and don'ts?
No, ma'am, they don't.
And they can go home and discuss this with the rest of the family.
No, ma'am, they don't. And that's why you need to ask for policies and procedures. You need to ask for a copy of them. Now, they may say, well, I'm not going to give you a copy, but you're welcome to inspect them. Well, we all carry these neat little things around in our pockets. So you stand there over the policies and procedures and you take a picture of every single page so that you can go home and print them off, so that then you have the handbook. But no, Marina, they don't want you to have the handbook because they know they can't provide the care they're supposed to care. They know that. So they're not giving that out because they don't want to be held accountable, because they don't make money off of that. Again, it's horrible, but it's true. So no, they don't have to give it to you, but you do have a right to ask.
Thank you.
Thank you. This made my day. I just got an Easter basket hand delivered to me.
Nice. Very nice.
If anybody needs some jelly beans, come on down.
That's nice.
Joanna, did you happen to say, I think Nancy had a question?
Right. I just answered her question. She was talking about sharing it.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to, is there anybody else that has questions?
Yes, Miss Ellen. Yeah. You're on mute, dear. Yeah, it's great. Now you're good.
Okay. Yes, I was interested in your discussion or your point about the new infrastructure plan that's being presently discussed by the Congress in the United States. I live outside the United States, but I have an interest because of a relative in the United States.
Okay.
And you mentioned that a part of the plan is the ability to provide services in the home of the person who requires that service.
Yep.
What happens in a situation where it is necessary to get the person out of the home? There's circumstances in the home that make it necessary for the person to be out of the home. Does that infrastructure plan address those kinds of situations?
I doubt it. Admittedly, I haven't read the plan, but I doubt it. That is what lawmakers would tell you the nursing home is for. And let me forgive me, Ellen, let me step one step back and just also share a truth that is shocking to people. If you have the means for assisted living is the middle level between living at home and nursing home care. It is not health care. So Medicare will not pay for it, right? Because it is not health care. Medicaid will pay for it in about 1 out of 100 patients. That is it. And that's typically only if it's very complicated, but a PACE program where the alternative would be putting them in a nursing home because they don't have a home and there really is no way for them to be taken care of in a nursing home because they're just not that sick. So assisted living is not even healthcare. And I get calls all day long that said, well, this assisted living facility let my dad choke or let my dad fall or let my dad not eat for 2 weeks. And I have to tell them that assisted living is the same as a college dorm. All it legally has to do is provide you a roof and 3 squares a day. That is it. But oh man, do they advertise the heck out of assisted living, because that's cash cow right there. That's like $6,000 a month and they only have to have 1 RN on call. They don't even have to have an RN in the building. And I've deposed a lot of these women that are the charge nurse in charge of a 200-bed assisted living facility, an LPN. They've never provided direct patient care. And basically all they do is stay home, and if the phone rings, they wake up and that's on call. So assisted living is also a racket because it makes great money. But I'm so sorry, Ellen, I don't have hope that there will be anything in that infrastructure plan to help with your system. If your loved one is needing to get out of the home or needing maybe care provided by someone other than your loved one here, you want to look up what's called PACE, P-A-C-E. It is not the end all be all. It is not great, but it at least will provide some social worker assistance and some coordination of care for your loved one if your loved one is Medicaid eligible. It's called PACE, P-A-C-E, and it's every jurisdiction runs it differently. So Henrico County runs it probably through Bon Secours. In Virginia, it's run by a group called Innovative. I mean, in Southwest Virginia, it's private people providing coordination of care through Medicaid dollars. It's not perfect, but it could be something for your loved one.
Understood.
Okay.
Thank you.
Absolutely, Ellen.
One of the questions, some of the questions that were submitted from our group. The first question would be, what are your thoughts on making public the arbitration agreement from a specific facility to assist with comparing arbitration agreements from that facility to guidelines in the state of Virginia?
So there are no guidelines on the state of Virginia for arbitration agreements. They're totally legal. I wish there was a guideline. Every single nursing home contract has an arbitration agreement in it, and they're all basically the same. And it's, you sue us, we kill your loved one, and you don't get to go to a jury. You have to pay a private judge $500 an hour to make this decision private. Isn't that wonderful? I mean, they're awful, they're egregious, but again, that's not state law. That would be federal law. And currently, federal law is very pro arbitration agreement because federal law is really been written by corporations for years. Everyone here who has a cell phone has signed an arbitration agreement. Everyone here who has a credit card has signed an arbitration agreement. Everyone here who has a car has signed an arbitration agreement. It's just you don't typically think about suing your cell phone company because they don't kill your loved one, right? So arbitration agreements are in almost every single consumer contract that we sign as Americans, and we don't even know they're there because they, have you read the terms on the 27 pages of single types? There's no requirements. The only requirement in Virginia is that the arbitration agreement be 12-point font. That's it. That's it. It can be buried on page 952 of the contract. They don't have to tell you about it. They don't have to explain it to you. You want to publish arbitration agreements? Sure. Unfortunately, I don't think they're going to think the following, Tracy. They're going to say, that's never going to happen to me. I'm not going to need to sue a nursing home. My mom's only going to be there for 30 days. That's not going to happen to me. And unfortunately, I don't think people care when they don't realize it impacts them directly.
Exactly.
Yep.
Kelly,
This is
Arbitration's
Kelly.
a mess. I hate
Yeah.
arbitration.
This is Kelly, and this is another question we received, and it's about the Ombudsman Office.
Yeah, there's another useless office.
Okay. They wanted to know what is their responsibility and who do they report to, if anyone?
Great question. Forgive me, I was eating a treat. So the ombudsman has the legal duty to find out if there is currently abuse or neglect going on. The minute your loved one leaves the facility, the ombudsman no longer has any right to investigate or jurisdiction. Okay, so that means if your loved one suffers abuse and neglect and goes to the hospital, the ombudsman's done. Or if you are smart and able to get your loved one out of that facility and bring them home, the ombudsman's done. Or like most people, if you say, this facility abused my mom, I'm going to get her to another facility, then the ombudsman's done. So all the ombudsman can do is investigate current abuse and neglect if the person is still in the situation. So then the ombudsman arguably will write a report, and the facility could be sanctioned by the state license holder. So the ombudsman's kind of go up to the point here, the point being the State Department of Health. The Virginia Department of Health is who holds the license for every nursing home in Virginia. And the ombudsmans are somewhat under the HHS umbrella, where they will then report what they find about a bad facility to the Department of Health. Now, one thing I encourage people to do all the time is file complaints through the Department of Health website with Virginia. It's free, and it's the only thing that gets nursing homes to care, because at the end of the day, if they're really bad, they'll have to pay a significant fine. So you do want to file a complaint with the Virginia Department of Health. All the time you want to file that complaint. It's free. Even if your loved one's still in the facility, do it. Then what happens is they send an investigator out. They pull 20 sets of files. They'll pull your loved one's set of files as well, and they'll investigate whether or not your allegations of abuse and neglect are adequate. Now, I will say this. I've had cases where the abuse and neglect was apparent, and we had successful lawsuits, and the inspector found no violation of the law. Flip side, I've had cases where the inspections have found huge violations of the law, and I haven't been able to take the lawsuit because there was no permanent injury. So the inspections don't help in a lawsuit. The inspections don't often mirror the lawsuit, but they are sometimes really helpful, because what they do is they get behind the scenes and they talk to the nurses before I ever get to depose them. So oftentimes I'll sit in a deposition and I'll say, Nurse Joyce, were you interviewed by the Virginia Department of Health about Miss Brown's care? And she'll say, yes. And I'll say, are you nurse 4 in this inspection report? Because they don't give me their names. And she'll say, yes, I'm nurse 4. And I'll say, okay, so did you really tell the inspector this place is never fully staffed? It's always understaffed and it's a hellhole? And she'll look at me and she'll say, yes, I really said that. So I then get that information that I normally would not have get. So that's why the inspection is sometimes helpful to me, but it's free of charge. Ombudsmans are really useless. I hate to say it. I think they're understaffed, underfunded, and they really aren't given much of an operations role. So it's I hate to say it, it's like a useless pit stop on the my loved one isn't getting good care train, and it doesn't really do anything. Yep.
We had a question that popped up.
Okay, great.
It says, is there a time limit to file a VDH complaint?
Great question. I don't think so. But the Virginia statute of limitations for all neglect and negligent cases is 2 years. So I would imagine if they did have a time limit, it would be 2 years. It would mirror the same as the legal time limit. Yep.
Okay.
So Lauren, do you know who the Virginia Department of Health reports to?
Yes. So the Virginia Department of Health reports to the governor, basically. It's just one of the many departments in Virginia.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. We had some questions about the Virginia Department of Health, but I think you pretty much covered it just now. So thank you.
Yeah. And unfortunately, during COVID, the inspectors haven't been in. So without the eyes and ears of loved ones, and without the inspectors, I know the care is 10 times worse than it was 2 years ago. And we
Right.
all know it was terrible 2 years ago. So we all know it's going to be awful now. And I've spent every single work day for the last year explaining this to people. In March of 2020, Governor Northam, as 40 other states did, issued an executive order that you cannot sue somebody for providing basically negligent medical care if their excuse for providing negligent care was related to COVID at all. So what that means is basically nursing homes are off the hook for everything in calendar year 2020 to calendar year 21, because every nursing home can claim we were understaffed because of COVID. The reason your loved one fell, so-and-so had to call out sick, or so-and-so came in and she had a fever, so we sent her home because of COVID. All they have to do is argue COVID as a defense to their bad care, and we cannot hold them liable. Yep.
May I ask a question, please?
Yes.
What about when a patient, say a daughter comes to see her mother and she observes that there's a scar on her leg and she doesn't know what happened, the staff doesn't know what happened, but obviously there was a wound inflicted and there were sutures involved and nobody knows anything about it. What does the family do in a case like that?
Department of Health is the best place to start, is filing a complaint with the Department of Health, because unfortunately, I have a burden of proof in a lawsuit. I can't prove that it got there because of abuse and neglect. I have a case that's going to arbitration in June. And my client was placed on a rusty metal shower chair, and she had very thin skin. And they knew that she had thin skin, and she was supposed to have sleeve protectors on her legs when she was transported for this exact reason. And unfortunately, the rusty metal shower chair ripped a hole in her leg 11 inches long. Okay. The nursing home's defense is, well, her skin was so thin, you could touch her and she would get an open wound. Anybody buying that?
So that means there's no other recourse. You just.
I have to argue. Yep. There is no other recourse. There's the Department of Health, who could potentially do an investigation and find out what happened, because there might be a staff person there who feels inspired to tell the truth to the Department of Health. Or I then have the burden of proof on evidence on how that wound got there. I can't go into court and say, ladies and gentlemen, it wasn't there on Monday, it was there on Tuesday, they must have done something. That doesn't rise to the level of proof that I have to have in a medical malpractice case. I can't even argue that. I have to know this caused this. So there's no legal basis for that claim, unfortunately.
So that means that whatever happened with that patient, tough luck.
Basically.
Wow.
Yep.
There's absolutely nothing that could be done in terms of, well, clearly not the law, but even if you gathered that information and you reported it at the federal level, would that be?
There's no federal complaint report system. The reports are all through the state. There's no federal Medicare complaint. It's only through the state Department of Health that holds the license for the Virginia nursing home. That's it.
Somebody must be covering up, because if she could be sutured and the wound be taken care of until it heals.
Right.
The patient,
no doubt, Marina. And interestingly, normally they would charge Medicare for that suture, because that's another dollar they could make. So of course there's a cover up. If someone's sutured and there's no bill, of course that's a cover up. Of course there is. But if you can't prove how it got there, it's tough. And here's the other thing, guys. Here's why lawsuits aren't the answer. Bad care is not enough for a lawsuit. I have to prove permanent or life-changing injury to your loved one. So the case where the woman's leg was ripped all the way open, the only reason that's a case is because she died 2 weeks later of septic infection from the wound. If she had healed, that wouldn't have been a case, because I have to prove permanent or life-changing injury in all medical malpractice cases. This is nursing home through surgery cases. So bad care is not enough to call me. All day long, I tell people, yep, that's bad care. But, because of a miracle, your loved one survived, or because of a miracle, your loved one got better. I cannot hold anyone responsible for bad care alone. The law does not allow it.
So what about like bed sores?
Oh gosh, bed sores are tough. And I'll tell you why bed sores are tough. Because the medical literature on bed sores protects the providers, right? So I will tell you this, my mom died of an issue related to a bed sore, but my mom had multiple sclerosis. So a bed sore was basically unpreventable. Unless I wanted to make my mom's last 6 months of her life completely miserable, where she'd be turned every 2 hours, not able to eat, not able to watch TV, not able to visit with family, not able to communicate. We had to make the choice. Are we going to make her comfortable for 6 months and then she could die of a bed sore? Or are we going to make her miserable and then eventually a bed sore will happen anyway? But not all bed sores are preventable. If your loved one is paralyzed or has really bad diabetes, the medical literature says not all bed sores are preventable. Now, I take bed sore cases, but rarely, because unfortunately I've had walking patients get bed sores because they've had really bad vascular system, because they have neuropathy or they're diabetic and they can't monitor their sugar. So if you have diabetes, a bed sore case is almost impossible, because the medical literature out there shows that small amount of pressure can really develop a pressure ulcer. So that means it's not always bad care. Sometimes it's just the underlying condition. Now, golly, bed sore cases are heartbreaking. What typically the lawsuit regarding a bed sore is that they didn't do anything about it between stage 1 and the more advanced stages. They didn't call the doctor. They didn't look at it when there were signs and symptoms of infection. They didn't try a turning schedule. They never sat the family down and said, hey, we're trying to turn your mom, but she's resisting. That's when the bed sore case exists. But the mere existence of a bed sore is not always negligence. Now, I would have told you differently 15 years ago. 15 years ago, I would have said to you, if there's a bed sore, there's bad care. Then I became the caregiver of a disabled person. And I will tell you that we did everything right and the bed sore still showed up.
Right.
So I now, unfortunately, personally believe that some of the literature, when it talks about bad vascular status and that kind of thing, is correct.
But in the case that you do have where a patient is unable to literally turn over by themselves, and they've been sort of sitting in their urine or, on a soaked bed for an extended period of time,
Right.
and it happens repeatedly, and they develop a bed sore,
Right.
would that be something that would be considered neglect and abuse?
Not always. And
No.
I'll tell you why. Because if they walk into Miss Lauren's room and they say, Miss Lauren, we want to turn you right now. And I say, no, I don't want to be turned. Miss Lauren, we want to change you right now. Nope, I don't want to be changed. And I use that example, Joanna, because that was my mom. Mom, I've got to change you right now. You can't sit in urine, but I'm tired. Please don't do it right now. Right? So that happens. So that's why I can't say unequivocally that the fact that somebody is sitting in a wet diaper and they develop a pressure ulcer, that is not always abuse and neglect. Could it be? Absolutely. Now, if the record reflects, they never offered turning. They never offered changing. They never explained to the patient what skin breakdown can do to them. They never said to the family, hey, when we come in to talk to your mom every 6 hours to try to turn her, she refuses. And we're worried about your mom developing a pressure ulcer, and then she could get osteomyelitis, and then she could die. So it really depends on the circumstance. So yes, it could be abuse and neglect, but no, it is not always abuse and neglect. I don't say always ever. I don't say always ever. Yes, Ellen, back to you.
Yes, Lauren, what I'm hearing from you, and you really phrased it in a nice way when you said this is Easter Sunday, the day of the resurrection, and should be good news, but we're hearing bad news. But I realize that what you're saying is obviously somebody who's been in the trenches, who realizes intimately the issues involved with what is happening in a lot of nursing homes. certainly in Virginia.
Mhm.
But it just seems to me that, at a time when a family is most vulnerable in terms of seeking care for their aging loved one, that seems to be a time when they're thrown to the wolves, really,
Amen.
with, negligent nursing homes.
Yep.
Now, I know you mentioned that, the importance of advocacy groups like Joanna's, and, I can understand the value of advocacy, private advocacy and public advocacy.
Mhm.
But I'm wondering whether at a higher level, certainly on the national stage, is a group like AARP, are they involved in any lobbying with respect to nursing home care? Because they're at the age group where
Yeah.
they should understand that there, but for the grace of God.
Yep.
Any of
So what
them.
I picked up my phone, Nellen, because yes, they should be, but I'm guessing that if you looked at who AARP's sponsors are,
Mhm.
they're the for-profit nursing home chains,
Mm-hmm.
because they don't want AARP to rock that boat, because then they make less money. So if you were to Google AARP corporate sponsors, I'm looking right now. Interesting, General Mills. New York Life Insurance, that's ironic. Smithfield Foods, that's ham, that's bacon right there. I don't see Verizon Foundation, IRS, United Healthcare. They sponsor AARP, they make more money. Should they do that? Yes. Do they usually do it? No. No one rocks this boat. So I subscribe to a magazine called Virginia Business. And this week I got Virginia Business, and it was the biggest law firms in Virginia, the biggest employers in Virginia. There was a whole sub-article on the most profitable nursing homes in Virginia.
Wow.
It is such a big industry in Virginia. It makes so much money for the people that own these companies. First of all, the Chamber of Commerce, all they do is lobby for these kinds of companies against trial lawyers like me. But it is a real issue. And so do I think the AARP should do this? Yes. Do I think they will? No. Because dollars speak.
I'd like to comment. I'd like to comment since you brought up AARP, because I had a conversation with one of their directors and was told specifically that they're not able to speak out and be as vocal as this group is, because his words, we are funded by the government.
Yeah. Yep. That's a really interesting point, and I think that's right.
That's what he said. They're funded by the government, so they're not able to speak out and be as vocal.
Yep.
But he said, but you guys can do it. And they're behind us 100% doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Medicare and Medicaid, isn't that taxpayers' money?
You would think that there'd be a direct line between, we don't want to pay money for bad care, right? I mean, you don't want to buy a gross cheeseburger. So you would think the government would have the interest of using their dollars wisely and protecting the people whose money they're spent. You would think. But because it's, you guys, the federal lobby for these groups is just enormous. It's enormous. It's enormous. It's so profitable to run these facilities. It just, you can make so much money off of it. And how sad.
And so here in Virginia, there are a number of corporations that are going about purchasing nursing homes.
Oh, yeah.
They're buying nursing homes, and most recently, Little Sisters of the Poor, a company just bought them out. I never thought that would happen.
Yep.
And they were one of the quote unquote
Good
better
ones. Yeah.
nursing homes.
That happened here in Roanoke. There was a facility that was, they actually didn't take Medicare dollars. They were private pay only. No, I'm sorry, they didn't take Medicaid dollars. They took 100-day Medicare dollars and then private pay. They're the best facility in town, and they just sold out for a for-profit. And they were the first COVID outbreak where like 100 people died. I mean, the staff all left because they were no longer getting benefits. It was awful.
Lauren, I have a question.
Yes, Miss Tracy, go.
Let me ask you, why, how are facilities able, okay, you have one particular facility that has a bad reputation. How are they able to get away with changing their name to something else just to cover up their bad reputation? And so they're able to, I mean, because that's happening a lot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So in fact, the largest chain of nursing homes in America declared bankruptcy a couple years ago. It's called Beverly, and it was awful. And they reorganized in bankruptcy and changed their name and, you know, put new pansies out front. And then it was like under new management.
Yes.
Really? It's not. But you can lie about that if you want to. So, but Tracy, even if the reputation's out there, they still make money. Like, they don't have to change their name to get patients, because we have the baby boomer generation and women work now, guys. That's why this industry is so profitable. 100 years ago, we stayed home and took care of our grandparents. We stayed home and took care of our parents. We can't do that anymore. We have jobs. So that's why this industry, it doesn't matter how bad these facilities are, they'll be full of patients. They'll be full. So, you know, you can change your name. You can have 0 stars on Google and 0 stars on Medicare, and they're still going to be full.
Wow. Right?
Because if it's the one nearest you, you're going to bite the bullet and agree to it so you can at least be with your loved one more than once a week. You know?
So here's a question, Lauren. Why do some attorneys discourage speaking to social media or saying anything when they are going through the process of
Great
suing?
question. Great question. I'll answer that. I've had clients who have just desperately wanted to, not intelligent, not articulate clients, really want to get their story out there. And because I can't control that message, I can't control what the news media prints, I can't control what they put on social media, it makes my clients look dumb and greedy. One of my favorite cases and my favorite clients, in a fit of rage, and I get it, because grief, there is rage, and I understand that. She went online and wrote horrible things about this facility. Well, a jury will judge her for that. They will think, oh, but if it were me, I wouldn't have voiced my dirty laundry, or I wouldn't have used those words, or I wouldn't have threatened to sue, or I would have handled it differently. And so because we can't control the message and a jury may see it, hopefully a jury sees it or an arbitrator, we really discourage it. And then unfortunately, 99% of the time, if the case is settled, it's here's $1, but you can't talk about it. So then there's confidentiality. So now you really can't talk about the case.
But then you're really not, because more often than not, every one of us here, maybe, I don't know if Kelly for sure, but we've been turned from one attorney to another attorney to another attorney. And it looks as though, it appears that they are doing that just to sort of at least get rid of the the statutes, the 2-year limit.
Exactly.
Right. And so
I have no idea what it's like to be on the client end of this, but let me tell you what it's like to be on my end of it. So Joanna, if you called me and I said, okay, that might be a case, first thing I have to do is request the medical records. If you have not gone to the court and qualified as your loved one's executor or administrator, then I have to help you do that first. That's 60 days right there, maybe 90 days. Okay, so that's 3 months. Then I request the medical record. I've never gotten a nursing home record within the 30-day statute, right? So that's another 90 days. So we're 6 months usually before I even get the records. Now, a case I just recently got, I got the first batch of records. I looked at them, I looked at them, I looked at them, I looked at them. Obviously, all the records weren't there. So then my client had to go back to the home office and request the records. It took 10 months from me to get the complete record. So
wow.
Now I will tell you, I read every single page myself. Some nursing home lawyers have their paralegals do it, but sometimes I might have 5 cases sitting on my desk, which may be 30,000 pages of medical records. 30,000 pages. So it may take me 2 weeks to get through one set of records before I know the story. So if you call me and we do everything right, it could be a year before I tell you, yes, you have a case or you don't. So I totally understand how that feels like someone's pushing the can down the road and now you have no time to hire a lawyer.
Mhm.
But if I've seriously looked at it for 12 months, then you probably don't have a case. And that's the other hard thing, is that we're not saying you got good care. We are not. But let me give you an example. I had a young woman call me. She was power of attorney of her uncle, She chose a nursing home for him, and he was treated abysmally, and he died as a result. So she came to me, and I said, he's your uncle? Yes. Does he have a living sibling? Yes. Where is his living sibling? Well, she lives in Georgia. When was the last time he saw her? 30 years ago. So the wrongful death law in Virginia is not what the person suffered, meaning the man in the nursing home, it's what his statutory beneficiary suffered in losing that person. So here I have a case with clear nursing home abuse, a death, but the case is measured by what a sister who he hasn't spoken to in 30 years, how sad she is that he's gone. What is a jury going to give a sister who hasn't spoken to her brother for 30 years?
Wow.
$0. So I had a case of abuse and neglect. I had someone who loved their uncle, who literally had taken care of him for 20 years, but the law didn't see her as a statutory beneficiary. The statutory beneficiary was the sister. So that's not a case. So I didn't file that case because no one wins. But maybe I'd get some attorney's fees, but the woman who hired me wouldn't win. So some stranger in Georgia gets $10,000 for nothing. I lose my reputation now because if there's a jury verdict for $10,000 out there, every nursing home abuse attorney that defends the nursing homes waves that verdict around in front of me in all my future cases and says, you want to try this case? The last jury gave you 10 grand. No way. So there's so many reasons we turn down these cases. We turn down the cases because the beneficiary maybe wasn't a real active person in the nursing home. We turn down the case because there's a doctor that says this person had less than 6 months to live. So if that's the case, if nursing home abuse and neglect kills somebody, but they had less than 6 months to live, the only thing I'm allowed to seek recovery for is your sadness as the statutory beneficiary of having lost them 6 months earlier. Not the fact that the nursing home killed your loved one. It's the difference between what they would have died and when they died. So then I'm only allowed to seek compensation for that 6 months. What is an Henrico County jury going to give me for you missing 6 months with your dad? The answer is nothing, because it's 6 months. That's why these cases are so hard. And that's why we turn down so many of them. Because I'm not going to spend your time for 2 years for $10,000. Not when you have to pay Medicare back for the hospitalization or Medicaid back for the ambulance bill or me 40%. So there's so many reasons we've turned these cases down.
Mm.
Yep. And a lot of times lawyers are terrible at explaining that. Oh, some lawyers are just say, oh, I'm too busy. Oh, I looked at the records, but I couldn't find an expert. My firm is a little different. We take the time to explain. It's usually, if I decline a nursing home case, you usually get a 3-page letter and it explains all the reasons why. And then at the end of the letter, I say, call me because I know you're heartbroken. And I know that you don't understand how their bad care can go without accountability. And I too am frustrated by that, but let's have a conversation as to why that is. Because again, the system is so limited to what it can do. If you're a nail, a hammer works. But if you're not, it doesn't. And that's the unfortunate thing about lawsuits, is it's very limited.
And that's what
Lauren, I go back a little more. When a nurse is assigned to patients, are they assigned because taking into consideration the dependency level of the patient or just the area of the unit?
It's usually the unit. Yep. So here's another interesting thing, Marina. Medicare actually tells the facility, okay, you've told me you have 100 patients and you've told me they're this sick so that I would pay you X dollars. So I think this level of sickness requires 30 nurses. Medicare actually has a suggested staffing rate that they produce to the facilities. saying based on your patient needs right now, based on your patient acuity, right? Nobody on your unit can walk. Nobody on the unit can feed themselves. Everybody on the unit has a pressure ulcer. Everybody on the unit has a trach. Based on those physical needs, I think you need X nurses. And guess what the nursing homes get to do with that staffing suggestion? They get to ignore it. There's no law that says if you don't follow, we don't pay you. And that would be another thing. If Medicare said, if you don't follow our staffing requirements, we don't pay you, guess what? Then they would. But they don't. But no, Marina, I wish. It's usually you're a warm body. There's no CNA on hall 3. Go to hall 3. That's how they get assigned. All of my depositions, I say, Nurse so-and-so, how many times have you cared for Mr. Brown before? That was my first day on that floor. Did you have time to review Mr. Brown's chart before you provided care and treatment? I did not. How did you know that Mr. Brown required this?
Yeah.
I asked the other nurse. Well, where was the other nurse? Well, she was on the other hall. Did you keep notes when you talked to the other nurse? Yep, I wrote it on a napkin. What'd you do with that? I threw it away at the end of my shift. Why? They don't want us to keep those notes. Why is that? I don't know.
Wow.
Yep. Yes, Ellen.
Yes, actually, it's my husband, Brian, who wants to ask the question.
Hi, Brian. Nice to meet, and thank you for being the only man here.
Hi, Lauren. How are you?
See,
Hi,
there's one
everybody.
more.
Oh,
He's
good.
answering, yeah.
Hi, yes, Lauren.
Yes, Mr. Brian, I'm listening.
I listened to you with undivided attention.
Thank you.
What I am hearing here from you is actually very, very frightening to me. I am at the end of what you had to say in your wonderful presentation, and following some of the other questions that came, what I seem to be hearing is an absolute national embrace of egregious abuse of the elderly.
Yes, that's
Am I
100%
right in,
true.
am I right in that am I right in that conclusion?
Yes, sir, you are.
My wife
It
is
is a
saying that it's a broken
100
system.
Yep, it is a 100% embrace over profits.
Right. So what I'm hearing,
Yep.
what I'm hearing is once the money aspect of it is including, I am actually getting from that that people are actually being paid to abuse humanity. And
Yes, sir.
They have caught on to it and are doing very well.
Yes, sir. That's exactly
Now,
right.
You may call me an optimist. And I am one of those who believe that for every problem, there is a solution. Now, I am not involved in what is happening here in the context of where you are at, for example, in terms of all that you do in the legal profession. But tell me, Lauren, knowing the system as you clearly know it, could you suggest to me something other than this long litany of hopelessness that I've been hearing here? I'm hearing ineffective laws. I am hearing non-existent laws. I am hearing big money, corporate money in full cry, doing as they like.
Yep.
What would you suggest outside of the parameters of all that you know currently exists that you think could make some serious headway in literally destroying what I think is bordering on being almost a genocidal system?
Brian, I love your heart. I have a lot of answers to that question, none of which are practical. Practically speaking, if we stopped putting our loved ones in these facilities, they'd have to stop doing this.
Okay.
If the market dried up, they'd have to change. But that's not practical because families are asked to make these decisions with a moment's notice and no time to plan. So my best advice is to plan generationally so that you never have to have that. I'll give you crazy examples. You pick a member of your family who doesn't work, to provide the care that you all financially support so that your loved one doesn't go into a facility. Well, golly, I have an only child. Who's she going to call in 40 years? That's not practical. It's not practical to say that we're never going to use one of these facilities, or we just won't go to the bad ones. So unfortunately, the market, if a restaurant is bad and people give it bad reviews and they stop eating there, it closes. That is how capitalism allows for bad business to shut down. But they have a complete corner on the market because this is everybody's emergency. So I don't have any practical solutions, Brian, except we have to get rid of for-profit elderly care. That's the only practical solution that I and my colleagues who do this every single day. I have a friend who testified in front of the House Ways and Means Committee this week on this very issue. And he is a nursing home abuse attorney, and he testified on how for-profit hedge fund companies are coming in, reorganizing these nursing homes, and it's actually getting worse. And when we talk about it as a group, that's the only answer we see.
Advocacy groups like what I am seeing here, is there any sort of national sort of response to this, to what is happening here? Do we have any sense of tremendous unity, effective unity, operating among these advocacy groups across the length and breadth of the United States of America? Is that now going on?
There is a group called the National Consumer Voice, and they've changed their names a couple times, Joanna. What are they called now?
I can't remember. I have it documented in my book. The National.
Isn't it still, I thought it was still National Consumer.
I think it is. So that's a national advocacy group just for this issue, Brian. So
just for this issue.
Yes,
it
sir.
Is still
That's
the
all they
National
do.
Consumer's Voice.
That's all they do.
How are they doing?
I mean, it's all dollars, right? The stronger your lobby is, the stronger your lobbying dollars. So if we give them money, they have a stronger lobby. But I'll say this, so trial lawyers like me, if I call my congressman says, this financially benefits you, Lauren. Why on earth would I listen to trial lawyers like you? And then I have to say, actually, I want to close my practice. I don't want to ever get another nursing home abuse or neglect call again, ever. They don't believe me. Trial lawyers are just the worst. People hate us. We're ambulance chasers. There's a reason there are lawyer jokes out there, right? It's that we're all in it for the money. Guys, if we were in it for the money, we would have taken your cases. It's
to what
not
extent is
just the money. Sometimes we know that we can't help. Sometimes a lawsuit can't help, and that's when I turn it down.
Yeah. To what extent is the National Consumer Group that deals specifically with this issue? To what extent do you think they are impacting the wider public who is not yet experiencing this problem?
Tiny, negligible impact, tiny.
And that is what concerns me. I'm wondering if there is something more that they could be doing or should be doing.
Yes, I mean,
that wider public impact.
Yeah, wouldn't I love to see a commercial? I don't watch TV, but if I did, that said, here's Joanna's story. Let's not be like Joanna and let's end for-profit nursing homes. Wouldn't that be lovely? Wouldn't there? It's unfortunately, we as a society are so reactive. We only care about an issue when it impacts us. And we only care after it's impacted us, right? George Floyd, unfortunately, is the best example, right? There's been police racism and brutality for the last 100 years in America. But Americans only gave a crap when there was a video showing, right? That's the kind of movement that has to happen, but it only comes on the back of tragedy, and it only comes on the back of that moment where the stars align and people care, even though it doesn't impact them. This is one of those issues that everybody says, that doesn't impact me. I would never send my loved one to a nursing home because no one ever wants to admit they'll have to.
Yes.
So it will have to be a miracle of tragedy and timing and some kind of public outcry.
There you go.
that we have never seen before any politician starts talking about this, because these are not sexy topics, right? These aren't guns and environmentalists, and they're just not. So I can't see how the stars would align, but it would have to be like that kind of moment.
Well, I wanted to say, Lauren, I worked as a nursing assistant for 30 years.
Oh,
So let me tell you, the 20-30 patient, oh, I've been there.
Yep.
But the thing is, what I've seen in the facilities that I've worked is a lot of these nursing assistants feel helpless because number one, you're threatened with your job.
Yep.
You know, the higher ups threaten you.
Yep.
You know, when the state does come in for an investigation, you're told not to speak to them. And they make sure to keep the state away from any nursing assistants.
That's
so that
right.
you're not able to talk to them. So these nursing assistants in these facilities, they do feel helpless.
They do. And they are. Yeah,
So
Tracy, you're absolutely right. Every single nurse, every CNA that I've ever deposed, I'm so kind to them. I thank them for their care and treatment. I thank them for how hard they work. And you know what? I've realized I'm the only person that's ever thanked them.
Yeah.
The people they work for don't thank them. You know, they put the signs, heroes work here out front during COVID.
Exactly.
They didn't treat them like heroes. They didn't even offer them full-time benefits. They didn't offer them $10 an hour.
Or either a mask, or they get one mask. And I know personal experience. I have friends that's in facilities now, and they're working during this COVID, and they said they get one mask. When COVID first started, they got one mask, and they were told to use that same mask every single day.
Yep.
You know, so I would hear when I worked in it, I'm out of it now, but when I worked in it, I would have families coming to me and saying, look at my mom's food. This is what she get, and I paid $9,000 for her to be here.
Right.
So when I would go down to the kitchen to try to get extra food, the kitchen staff tell me, oh, they can't have extra food.
That's right. Because their budget, because the director of dietary management probably works on a bonus system, and the only reason he gets paid at the end of the year is if he stays in budget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the budget is, yeah, I know. Nancy, you just wrote a great question. I found a consultant called a senior advisor who said he offered outside recommendation. He did get paid by the facilities. Yep. You never trust one of the Place for Mom.
Yeah.
My mom used to watch Hallmark a lot, and so I'd see those ads from that actress about a place for moms. Who do you think pays for that? The facilities, the same ones that are faxing the social worker every morning. We have 3 open beds.
Oh. Wow.
Don't trust anybody. Now, I'll tell you what loved ones have started doing with me is they'll call me and say, Lauren, I have to do a nursing home, and these are the 2 options. Can you spend 20 minutes digging in? And I'll know in 5 minutes. I look in the circuit court records. I'll look on Medicare.gov. I'll know in 5 minutes which is the worser of the evil. But beyond that, you know, it's not readily available stuff.
I have a question, Lauren. On the Department of Health, the Federal Department of Health website, they have a section where they implore you to call or to write if you have witnessed or you know of elder abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And what are your thoughts on making that submission, whether it's really going to be effective, or whether you think it's just going to go through the rhetoric?
So I actually don't know about a federal Department of Health complaint on abuse and neglect. I've never known of that. So it's news to me that we even investigate that. So my guess is it's not very impactful. Because I didn't even know about it. Yep. And here's the other thing, guys. You know, a lot of people will say to me when they first call, well, the police are involved, because I called the police because I thought this was abuse or neglect. And so the police were sent, or an autopsy was done, or something like that. I know of one prosecution of a facility abuse and neglect that wasn't a sexual assault. Sexual assaults, unfortunately, get criminal charges, but outside of sexual assault, they don't. And again, it's because the evidence requirement isn't there. So if you have a CNA well, for example, in Marina's example, if you have somebody who's been stitched, and I know, Joanna, from watching, your news story, that was, how on earth did my mom get that wound? And nobody talked about that. That's not enough for a prosecutor to prosecute any one person for harm, because there's probably 20 different people in and out of that person's room. So who do you prosecute? You can't. Criminal justice system is not in any way built to handle this stuff.
So
It's
when a
totally
report
not.
from the Virginia Department of Health comes up with a report that indicates a facility has fraudulently accessed the funds of its resident, is that something that shouldn't be held, or the facility, should they not be held accountable for that within the law?
Well, so the law, meaning the administration of that license, did hold them accountable. They cited them, and they probably fined them a small amount for that. So that accountability exists in the administration of the license.
Hmm.
But so there's no law written that says if a nursing home does X, you get Y. There's no such thing. The law instead is medical malpractice law. If you have been the victim of medical neglect and you have suffered permanent or life-changing injury, then you can file a lawsuit. But it doesn't prescribe what you get. You get the damages. Well, what are the damages? Well, we talked about that.
Mhm.
The damages are, if you're the statutory beneficiary and the person's died, how long would they have lived otherwise? What's the difference? So
Tell me something.
Yes.
Sometimes the patients are taken out for outings, like they
Yes.
go to Walmart, they go shopping and whatever else. So is there any type of insurance that's covering them and the caregivers while they're out?
it's the
God
same.
forbid something should happen to them?
Yep, it's the same policy that covers them in the facility. I'll say most nursing homes don't do outings. It's an assisted living. Look at the field trips. Look at all the fun things we do. That's an assisted living marketing ploy. But yes, they should have coverage. I know of a case where a friend of mine prosecuted it, where a woman was at an assisted living facility. She was taken to this nice hotel for lunch. She eloped, meaning she left unaccompanied. She fell down a bank and she got significantly injured, and they were held liable for that. So their duty doesn't change at Walmart than it does at the facility. The problem is their duties are, who defines their duties, right? It's what a jury defines. It's what one arbitrator.
The hospital would not cover any damages to any injury to them.
No, they're not going to admit, oh, we're sorry about that, Marina. Let us write us a check or pay for your medical bills. Heck no, they're not going to do that. They're going to make you sue them. Just like in a car accident, State Farm doesn't call you and say, oh, we're so sorry that our driver hit you. Let us take care of it. No, they don't do that. They make you fight.
So in essence, in all of this, Lauren, you're saying the best recourse, well, firstly, is to really go and make sure that those who are representatives of the state at the federal level hear loud and clear that they are also accountable for making the changes
Yes.
that are required. But this is not a campaign issue for them.
No, it's not. It's not sexy.
It never is.
But those of you who have Donald McEachin as
Mm.
your congressman in Richmond, he's a trial lawyer. He handled these cases. He knows this.
We
So if
reached
you
out to
are-
him.
If you are in, well, keep it up, demand to meet with him. And if you don't get anywhere, let me know and I can call, because he'd actually be one of the few people on this issue to care.
I can tell you, we've reached out to him. Tracy, I think you said you wrote a couple of times, didn't you?
Yeah, I have to get the privacy issue form, because they sent me a privacy form.
Mhm.
And I have to get that. So yeah, so I need to get that from him.
So
Well, as
we've-
a constituent, you have his ear. I'm not a constituent. I'm just a fellow trial lawyer. But every once in a while, he asks me for money. So next time I'll say, hey, before I give you $1, there's some ladies I want you to meet with in Richmond, and they're awesome. And you need to meet with these ladies.
So we've reached out to the governor's office. We've reached out to the mayor's office. We've reached
Governor,
out to
mayor, they have nothing to do with this, guys.
nothing.
you're wasting, I mean, I don't mean to be unkind, but you're wasting your time with them. This
We
is
cleared-
not
we-
your job.
Yeah, we found that out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Jessica, you're raising your hand. I love that. Hi.
Hi, I have two questions really.
Yes.
So my first question is, if your loved one in these facilities, you have accounts where you are able to put money on their accounts and they can have it if they are going on outings and whatnot. If something happens to your loved one, either they're discharged or they go to hospital or they pass away, and those funds are questionable at the end of the day,
Yep.
what legal recourse do you have? Do you bring the police in for something like that? Is it theft? Is it they have the responsibility to reconcile before they give you the balance of the money? And what are you legally supposed to be informed of as the next of kin,
Great
the
question.
legal rep?
The answer is nothing. They have no legal duty to provide you any information. They have no legal duty to reconcile any account. Just like if your loved one dies and they have a Visa card, Visa owes you no legal duty to reconcile their account. They owe you no legal duty to let you know what is owed. When it comes to someone's passing, there's no like, we have to provide you this accounting. So the answer, Jessica, is you have to be the squeaky wheel. And that's why you have to keep track of everything. So, let's say, for example, there was $300 in that account. No prosecutor is going to handle a $300 nursing home criminal charge. First of all, a nursing home can't be a criminal defendant, right? You can't sue the nursing home for stealing $300. So your local prosecutor wouldn't be able to do that. You could go to small claims court and file a claim against them saying, I represent the estate of my mother. You owe her estate $300. So that's how you have to do it. They get away with it all the time because no lawyer's going to take your case for $300 because I charge $300 an hour. So you're not going to pay me $300 to get $300. I'm going to tell you to just let it go and move on. And so that's why these accountings end up being constantly wrong, because families think, well, is it worth me to fight for $60 or $300? Or we're not talking thousands and thousands of dollars. We're talking small amounts of money to the court system such that it's really hard to get it back.
Okay, so my next question is, if you still have a lot of questions about the care and what the rights were of your relative, they passed away, they're no longer their patient, they no longer have a responsibility to share their policies and procedures with you, correct?
Correct. And how about this? I ask for them in litigation. I say, Judge, I want their policies and procedures. I want to know what care my loved one or this person should have gotten. And you know what the law says? That doesn't establish the standard of care. You don't get those policies. You're not allowed to see those policies. You're not allowed to rely on those policies, Lauren. The standard of care is what your nursing expert says. So they take the time to write the policies, to draft the policies, because the law says they have to have them. Then they should take the time to train their nurses on the policies, but yet that doesn't establish the standard of care. Give me a break. In what of your offices do the rules not establish the rules? Of course they do. Oh, Jessica, it's so backwards. It's so backwards.
Are there any more questions from the floor? Okay, at this time, we want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. And Lauren, we would like to thank you. Oh my God, I got chills just listening to you speak.
No, I'm sorry, it was so depressing.
Yeah.
But you guys have lived this, so I'm not telling you anything you don't know.
Very helpful. So thank you, Lauren, for taking the time to inform us of these important issues. And everyone, thank you for joining us. And please remember, we are our loved one's voice.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending, everyone. Lauren, thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
guys. I feel very blessed to have been invited and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
Bye.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.
Good night,
Thank you very
everyone.
much. Very informative.
Thank you. all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Happy
Bye-bye.
Easter for those who
Bye.
celebrated.